As I exhaled, my breath created swirling wisps in the frigid evening air. I pushed open a sturdy steel door adorned with a small lattice window, stepping into the hallway. Positioned to the right of the door, a junction box with an electricity-regulating switch caught my attention. With a flick of the switch, a light bulb illuminated above my head. Ah, the presence of electricity was a relief. Placing my bag on the floor, I surveyed the surroundings. The spacious room before me served as a living room, featuring a fireplace as its centerpiece. Across from it stood two high-backed, upholstered armchairs in a shade of deep green, with a petite carved serving table nestled between them. Adjacent to a window that offered a view of the lake, an oak table stood proudly. Adorning the polished log walls were a pair of prints depicting hunting scenes and several medallions showcasing the antlers of deer and roe deer. Just above the fireplace, a full-length wolf skin served as a backdrop for an antique flintlock firearm, and a copper hunting horn wrapped in weathered leather. Hanging above the sofa against the wall, an oriental felted rug displayed an assortment of antique musical instruments, collected from various places I had visited during my work travels. This was certainly not a space adorned with typical feminine motifs like pink kittens or elephants. From the living room, two doors beckoned, one leading to the kitchen and the other to a cozy bedroom. I retrieved my bag of groceries and stored them inside a spacious double-chamber refrigerator. Returning to the living room, I carried with me a bottle of Irish whiskey, ready to unwind. As the autumn twilight began to cast its fleeting glow, I gazed out the window, still able to discern the towering pines and the tranquil lakeshore. Resting upon the sandy beach, a black overturned boat lay in slumber, with several seagulls perched on its tar-coated hull. From time to time, they would take flight, their wings skimming over the water in a flurry of movement. Taking my time, I carefully tended to the fireplace. Initially, a hint of smoke filled the air, but as it gained warmth, the smoke dissipated, leaving behind a comforting ambience. I placed the bottle on the table and settled into my chair, feeling a sudden wave of boredom wash over me. Desiring some form of relief, I found myself too lethargic to search for a glass, opting instead to drink directly from the bottle's neck. A pleasant warmth spread through my stomach, and without much thought, I simply wanted to sit and gaze at the mesmerizing dance of fire in silence. The crackling wood gradually transformed into scarlet bars adorned with delicate black lace as flickering tongues of fire swayed upon them. For the first time in a while, there was no rush within me. Unexpectedly, I retrieved a note that exuded the fragrance of perfume and dialed a number unfamiliar to me. The other end answered instantly, as if anticipating my call. I owed my physical appearance and characteristics to the combination of my mother and father, whose genes shaped my being. Almost akin to Vysotsky, my full name was Veronica, yet everyone, including my parents, preferred to call me Nika. I grew up in an ordinary family, where despite being an only child, I wasn't overly indulged. My father had harbored hopes for a son, but fate had granted me instead. Consequently, I received a predominantly masculine upbringing. In the 8th grade, my father introduced me to the world of biathlon, and from that point on, my life became intertwined with the sport. While I didn't achieve remarkable heights in biathlon, I certainly wasn't at the bottom either. Shooting in particular was my forte. When my marksmanship was on point, I avoided penalty laps and managed to keep pace with my less fortunate competitors. Even in university, I remained dedicated to the sport, and by the age of 20, I had become an accomplished biathlon expert. At some juncture, I realized that my passion for skiing had waned, prompting me to transition solely to shooting. Almost unconsciously, 2 years later, during my 3rd year, I attained the coveted title of Master of Sports in shooting. In addition to sports, I felt a profound attraction to painting and art in general. Consequently, I diligently prepared myself for admission into the Department of Art at the University of Culture, where I encountered no obstacles in securing my place. The years of diligent study swiftly passed by, culminating in the acquisition of my diploma and a notable reputation within certain circles of young artists and collectors. With the successful attribution of a revered Byzantine icon from the 15th century, which later found its way to a prestigious Christie's auction with a lofty valuation, I found myself being invited to assess the prized possessions of renowned and affluent collectors. The recognition and esteem I garnered among clients and colleagues not only brought prestige, but also afforded me the opportunity for substantial rewards. Consequently, I swiftly transitioned to a pleasant two-room apartment in the bustling city center, while acquiring a charming wooden house on the shores of a picturesque lake nestled within the heart of Berezynsko Pusha. In my youth, radiating beauty and vitality, I invested the earnings I accrued into tasteful attire and indulged in physical activities to maintain excellent fitness. The time had come for me to establish a family of my own. All seemed to be in order, except for one critical aspect. I struggled to select a suitable candidate for a life partner. Mind you, there was no shortage of suitors. I frequented places where they congregated, such as clubs and billiard rooms. Whenever I beckoned, a horde of men, each varying in appearance, would eagerly respond to my call. Thin and stout, fair and dark, affluent and less so, they all vied for the chance to offer me their hand and heart. However, I sought not merely a prince on a white horse. Like any woman, I aspired to find the one person with whom I could journey through life until our twilight years, departing from this world on the same day. Yet, herein lay the predicament. Most men perceived women as inferior beings, occupying a lower rung on the social ladder. Unconscious sexism pervaded the thoughts of many, blending patronizing condescension with desire. They propagated the fallacy that women were solely motivated by material wealth. In my opinion, it was often the men lacking in this regard. Women and infidelity became unjustly intertwined in their minds. An obsessive credo emerged that all women were unfaithful. The audacity, as if all men were inherently faithful and chaste. For numerous modern men, a woman was merely an object for domesticity, a kitchen appliance with painted eyes, a demeaning view that reduced the essence of womanhood to a mere vessel for their comfort and pleasure. And so, at a social gathering amidst a lively crowd, I encountered a young man named Vlad. I couldn't say that I felt particularly drawn to him. He possessed the same qualities commonly associated with men, and above all, a name I never cared for. However, as they say, one cannot choose their companions like fish cannot choose their fellow fish. Surprisingly, Vlad ended up moving in with me, and we began living together as partners. It was a typical arrangement, akin to any other couple. Our apartment would often be strewn with dirty socks, occasionally carrying the scent of alcohol, and he would casually refer to me as baby in a flip-flop manner. We even had visits from his mother on weekends. We lived this way for a year, until Vlad began insisting on having a child and formalizing our relationship. After some consideration, I agreed. In October, I had to travel to another city to have an icon examined. I had already booked a plane ticket and returned home early to prepare for the trip. I made multiple attempts to reach Vlad, but his phone was switched off. I hurriedly arrived home and practically sprinted up to the third floor. Upon entering the apartment, an eerie silence greeted me. I ventured into the kitchen, finding it empty. Perhaps Vlad was asleep after his night shift. I peered into the bedroom, and what I witnessed left me utterly astounded. There stood an unfamiliar girl, completely nude, on all fours, gripping the bed's frame with both hands. Behind her, also unclothed, was Vlad, sporting a triumphant grin as he rhythmically spanked his companion while gripping her hair. She moaned in sync with his movements, occasionally hitting her forehead against the wall in a passionate fervor. Both partners were so consumed by their pleasure that they remained oblivious to their surroundings. much like oblivious children engrossed in their play. I stood in silence for a moment, genuinely intrigued by the intimate spectacle, before coughing loudly and politely greeting them. Startled as if propelled by an invisible force, Vlad scurried to the corner of the room. Desperately shielding his modesty with his hand, he clumsily uttered the words of an old popular song. "It's not what you think." The young woman hastily rushed past me, collecting her clothes along the way. "Neka, let's approach this situation with civility," Vlad pleaded, attempting to hide his shameless gaze. He tried to convince me that what had transpired was a mere embarrassment, not worth a second thought. I maintained my composure, patiently enduring his verbal diarrhea, but ultimately gestured silently towards the door. It was clear to me that his words held no weight. "You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, begging on your knees," he exclaimed in a fit of rage. "Bitch." Unfazed by his insults, I labeled myself as a bitch as well. He failed to reveal what it was that I was supposedly going to belittle him about. Hastily, I tossed his packed suitcase onto the landing and firmly closed the door. Some time later, his mother called. Uninterested in engaging in conversation, I promptly turned off my phone. The overbearing woman received a blow to her excessively inflated ego, and that was the extent of it. Subsequently, I settled onto the couch and allowed tears to flow. I swiftly resolved the situation at hand. It became evident that the icon possessed a concealed compartment. It was a counterfeit, a replication of a 16th century antique icon meticulously painted on an aged board. With no urgent matters to attend to or individuals to consult, I decided to travel back home by train. As I approached the station, I heard the sound of a notification indicating that the payment had been deposited into my account. Procuring a ticket for the sleeping car was a hassle-free affair, and I settled into my designated seat. There was still a brief interval before departure, providing ample time for me to get comfortable and change attire. With less than a day remaining for the journey home, I aimed to make it as pleasant as possible. Leisurely, I slipped into my tracksuit, retrieving a bottle of cognac from my bag. Pouring the amber liquid into a plastic cup, I glanced out the window, occasionally sipping from it. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, the compartment door swung open, revealing my fellow traveler, a woman in her 40s, who promptly stowed her bag beneath the shelf and joined me by the window. "Are you up for some Montava?" she asked, a mischievous smile playing at the corners of her lips. "And you really shouldn't drink cognac without an appetizer." Returning her smile, I nodded. "Would you like some?" I offered, reaching for a clean glass. "I do," she replied. "My name is Larissa." She rummaged in her bag and retrieved a lemon and a box of chocolates. "Veronica, nice to meet you," I said, accepting her introduction. "Can I interest you in a snack?" Larissa tore off the cellophane and opened the box. "Help yourself." As time passed, it felt as if Larissa and I had known each other for ages. I shared details about myself, including the struggles with my unsettled husband. Larissa, however, remained less talkative but actively engaged in the conversation. Eventually, our cognac ran dry, but Larissa wasted no time and produced another bottle, keeping the fun going. The atmosphere grew warmer, prompting me to unbutton and then remove my blouse, revealing a bra and sweatpants. Larissa followed suit, and we discreetly closed the compartment, ensuring no curious fellow passengers or overzealous conductor disturbed us. The revelry continued, and I felt a sense of sadness and resentment fading away, replaced by clarity and understanding. I chose to ignore the longing glances my newfound friend occasionally cast my way. As the temperature rose, I attempted to open the window, only to find it sealed for the winter. Sensing my discomfort, Larissa suggested shedding our remaining clothes. Agreeing, I slid down my sweatpants, leaving me in just my panties. Larissa mirrored my actions. We sat there, semi-clothed, facing each other, engaging in lively conversation. However, the topics of discussion took an unexpected turn. Larissa began sharing stories about her friends and their unfulfilled love lives, expressing her disillusionment with most men, and proclaiming that only a woman can truly understand another woman. I simply nodded and smiled, somewhat bewildered. Suddenly, Larissa leaned closer, her hand tracing the inner contour of my thigh while she continued to speak. A surge of heat coursed through me, rising from my lower abdomen to my chest. My mouth went dry, and in turning toward Larissa, my hand accidentally brushed against her breast. Larissa froze momentarily before impulsively pulling me into a passionate embrace, sealing our connection with a long, fervent kiss. Simultaneously, her free hand deftly undid the clasp of my bra. As I opened my eyes and glanced at my watch, I realized there was still about an hour left until M. Peering out the window, I noticed that daylight had already emerged. Raindrops, streaked by wind and velocity, adorned the glass. However, Larissa was nowhere to be found in the compartment. Instead, there lay a note on the table, emanating a scent of expensive perfume. It read, "Everything was wonderful. You're adorable. Kisses L," followed by a mobile number. Reflecting on the events of the previous night, I had no regrets. It was a satisfying conclusion to the task at hand, a kind of unexpected bonus. As I lay there, I contemplated my feelings about the situation, or rather, the lack thereof. Nonetheless, one thing was clear: I felt content. Although I had no intentions of pursuing further acquaintance, I stowed the note in my wallet. The suburbs came into view beyond the window, and the doors of the adjacent compartment slammed shut. Swiftly, I dressed myself, grabbed my bag, double-checked to ensure I hadn't forgotten anything, and stepped into the corridor. My hometown welcomed me with a cold, damp breeze that whisked fallen leaves across the path. Leaping onto the platform, I made my way towards the station exit. The firewood had finally burnt out, necessitating a refill. Holding the weighty door, I reached the porch and began ascending the stone steps leading to the terrace. Unexpectedly, my balance faltered, causing my feet to slip forward, arms flailing as I tumbled onto my back, with the back of my head colliding against the stony surface. The last sensation I remembered was a sharp pain coursing through my left arm. When I regained consciousness, my eyes fixated on the pristine white ceiling above me. With considerable effort, I turned my head to the side. An unfamiliar man occupied a stool beside me, diligently monitoring my pulse while gripping my arm. "You're awake. That's wonderful," he exclaimed. Confused and struggling to form my words, I managed to ask, "Where am I?" "In the hospital, my dear," he reassured me, gently patting my hand. "You have nothing to worry about. It's all over now. I'm your doctor. Just rest for a couple of days, and then you can go home." Baffled, I inquired, "What happened to me?" As I slipped and collided with the rocks, the situation could have been far worse. Adding to the misfortune, I accidentally cut my hand on the nearby axe hanging on the wall. It was a close call, and if it hadn't been for my friend, I might have bled to death. "Girlfriend?" I exclaimed, surprised. "Yes," she replied. She rushed me to the hospital just in time. To stop the bleeding, she improvised by using a stocking as a makeshift bandage on my arm. Time was running out, and I was losing a significant amount of blood. Thankfully, our compatible blood types and rhesus factors allowed for a successful transfusion. Curiosity overwhelmed me. "Where is she now?" "She's here in the corridor, unwilling to leave," the doctor informed me. "We had to extract nearly half a liter of blood from her. She's currently resting on the nearby bedpost." As the doctor concluded, he advised me to rest and regain my strength. Just then, the door creaked open, and Larissa quietly entered the room. "How are you?" she asked, almost in a whisper, her voice filled with concern. To my bewilderment, I couldn't comprehend how she had ended up at my house. Larissa gazed at me with compassion, tears welling up in her eyes. Her appearance was striking, particularly with one stocking on. "How did you find me?" I inquired, seeking answers. You called me, she replied quickly, afraid I would cut her off before she finished explaining. I was worried that something had happened to you, so I hurried straight to your place. I discovered you on the porch, surrounded by a pool of blood. I managed to carry you to the car and rushed you to the hospital. She timidly adjusted the blanket covering me, as if fearing that I might reject her touch. And what about your husband? I questioned, wondering about the consequences. Did I mention I had a husband? She murmured, lowering her gaze. I should go now. Get well soon. Wait, I implored, gesturing for her to sit at the edge of the bed. Summoning my strength, I embraced her neck, and our lips met in an intense kiss.